you have to be able to give kids the tools to help themselves. And so like if a kid is more calm for the rest of the day or more focused for the rest of the day because they sat with me and breathed for 10 minutes and just like had the space and felt safe and no one was making fun of them and it didn't matter where they were from or what clothes they were wearing or whatever, like that matters. That they can take that with them forever, right? And so for me, I'm just trying to give things that like we have now, like that we have access to as 30-year-olds and saying like, you can do this. You can totally do a sun salutation. I'm going to teach it to you and you're going to feel much better afterwards, right? And like, oh, what does this feel like? Does this feel like a stretch? Does this feel hard? Does it feel easy? Like all of those things, like they need language around that. And so they can also then, if they find themselves in a situation where maybe they need a brain break or something, like then they can advocate for themselves. They can raise their hand and say, I need to take a couple of breaths, or I need to step out for a second, or I need, like, it's just, all of those kinds of things that are just really important, especially for kids who, again, don't have all of the resources. Their moms aren't taking them the soul cycle, right? And so, so that's kind of also just my way of like, helping to level the playing field. It's so small scale, but it matters, right?
It's not. It really isn't. Also, I was actually listening to a podcast recently where they were talking a little bit about sort of the way the morals, the values, the things our parents instill in us and how that transpires in our way of thinking and our actions as we get older a lot too. And oftentimes, what you were saying, if they feel calm and they don't have that energy, there's so many times where there's kids with ADHD, learning disabilities, any sort of trouble maybe with their emotions or behavior, acting out, where they get told, oh, they're just fresh, they're bad kids, and they don't know. It's because no one's doing that. Like I think a little bit extra effort sometimes. Realize they're not a bad kid. They're not totally disobeying you, but they're neurodivergent. Yeah, right. Like, and a lot of times things like that happen where there's maybe something bigger going on. Yeah. But it's not chipped away at enough to really uncover. But on the podcast, there was some study that they were talking about where they did this survey, and it was parents and children who in group 1 and then another group, say group 2, right? Group 1, the parents during childhood, during their teen years would say, you're such a good kid. You're so well behaved. I hit the jackpot. You're so, you're so bright. You're so smart. You can do anything. I'm so lucky you're my child. The other one was like, why do you keep talking back to me? You're so fresh. Why are you acting out? Why'd you come home late? And it was a lot more sort of, I guess, aggressive or blame placing on their parenting style. And in group 1, they were like, the kids weren't always angels, but it was just sort of it's the value of positive reassurance too. And
that makes sense.
It directly had an impact and a correlation to what the kids did after school, whether they went to get further their education, what they did for their career path, what their extracurricular activities were. And so it reminds me of the idea of like, the way we speak to people, we almost speak things into existence sometimes that aren't true. Yes. And there's such a responsibility on our parts to check that. Yeah. And you because so many kids can't, right? Because they, like you said, they don't have the language.
And they haven't learned the skill.
Yeah. And the difference that you can make is just monumental.
Well, I mean, I have to bring it back to like 2 things, right? Like one is self-care. Like I'm not teaching them to go out and get a manicure. I'm teaching them how to regulate their nervous system, right? And so like going back to this idea that it can't be bought is, like it's something that plays into the kids, right? Like I don't want them to think that their self-worth comes from a pair of Jordans. It doesn't. And the other thing, it also comes back to like this idea of, waiting to those of us who haven't done it yet and who have the choice, like waiting to get married and have kids, waiting until you have your own tool set of self-regulation and knowing how to navigate right? Like difficult situations, like making sure, right? Like you kind of, if you have the choice to wait to start a family and stuff, like it matters because, right? Like how you talk to your kids, how you treat your kids, like a lot of it has to do with how you were treated as a kid, how stressed you are, if you've been taking care of yourself, if you've been sleeping, have you had something to eat, like all these things that dysregulate us, like they like play out in how our personal relationships. And nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is connected from, I don't care if we're talking about DEI, if we're talking about wellness, if we're talking about, how we treat other people, how we treat kids, how our teachers are burned out and overworked and all the things, like it all comes back to all the same shit.
Yeah.
So, it matters that we pay attention. It matters that we are like doing the work, like doing our work, but also like doing the work of like being of service, because we are literally raising the next generation. It matters that they know that like we hit the jackpot with them, right?
Yeah.
That they are rock stars and like we're there to support them. So I just want to be a part of that. And I feel definitely different doing it as a mom, because I'm just like, you're amazing, just go out and be amazing, like don't listen to anybody else, listen to me, like you're amazing, like look
just
at that down dog
out, yeah.
That down dog is amazing.
Oh my gosh.
It's all good.
I totally get it. And I think, this is, of course, not to say that you're going to hit a certain age and not make mistakes. Parents are always going to make mistakes, right?
No.
But kind of like what you said, I mean, just thinking about who I was at 27 to 32 now, I'm a whole new person.
Yes.
So it's just sort of the idea of imagine how much more you could learn in even a short period of time, and not rushing it if you don't have to,
right.
And giving yourself the grace, being patient. I also think like there's so many people that are doing this inner child work and this shadow work now.
Yeah.
And it's people, they're like, my whole personality was about a trauma that I didn't even know that I went through when I was younger, because I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the language, and my memory, I haven't
likely
been able
your
to.
parents probably didn't have the tools or the language either.
But it goes to show, I think people are having breakthroughs so much later in life, where anytime you can get a breakthrough, take full advantage, you know what I mean? But it's just almost a shame, like, man, could we have gotten there quicker? Could we have gotten to this point if we had the resources and the tools? And you are making strides in that area. And it's very important. And we're very, very grateful for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.